Did you think it was justified, the FISA application for Carter Page?
Listen, I've said before that there are things that should never find their way in the public domain. FISA applications are one of those. I think it's an awful precedent. And if the American people have learned anything from its release, is that there was great justification to the courts as to why the FISA application was approved.
Chairman Richard Burr right there indirectly calling out his counterpart on the House Intel Committee, Devin Nunes. Joining me now is Minnesota Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar. Senator, thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Katie. It's great to be on.
What do you make of Senator Burr saying that the FISA warrant application process for Carter Page, which many in the Republican Party have been using as an example of why they believe this investigation is politically motivated and why it's not fair to the president? What do you make of Senator Burr on the Senate Intelligence Committee, who has access to all this information, coming out and going very directly against what the House Intel Committee has been trying to say?
Well, it really doesn't surprise me because from the beginning, the Senate Intelligence Committee with Senator Burr and Senator Warner have been trying as much as possible to do things on a bipartisan basis, because the way we figure it, a number of us over here, this is about the security of our democracy, and election security is national security, and allowing this investigation, including the work that Director Mueller has done here to figure out what happened, including with Carter Page, should be allowed to move forward, and that they should stop messing around in partisan politics. And I appreciate Senator Burr's role here.
Is Senator Burr a lonely voice on this in the Republican Party within the Senate?
Well, not if you look at Senator McCain's statement after the meeting between Vladimir Putin and the president, in which he called it disgraceful, or you look at some of the things that you've heard out of Senator Graham or Senator Flake, Senator Corker, others who have really believe that we need to step back. Senator Rubio knows this. In the election in 2016, the Russians were messing around and staging cyber attacks in the Republican primary that hurt him. So it isn't just about Trump versus Clinton. It is also happening on the Republican side. So I have appreciated their support on moving forward on our Secure Elections Act that I have with Senator Lankford. We're going to have a markup in August in the Rules Committee, and we've also worked to get some money out there, and we'd like to get more to the states. You know, the state of Arkansas or the state of North Dakota isn't going to be able to defend themselves from a foreign power attacking our elections.
There's also a sustained effort, though, that continues on behalf of some Republicans, especially in the House, to tear down this Robert Mueller investigation, to tear down the credibility, to say that it's politically motivated. That's what Devin Nunes was trying to do with this Carter Page FISA warrant. Senator Burr there obviously breaking from him, but do you think your counterparts in the Senate, your Republican counterparts, are doing enough to make sure that the investigation is protected? Would you like to see them do more?
Well, I would always like to see them do more. I think it's been a bit slow, but what I have appreciated is those that have been willing to step out. And as you know, on the special counsel statute, the bill that we are trying to strengthen, we got some Republican support on that, and we're able to pass it out of the Judiciary Committee. I'd love to see that come up as a vote on the floor, because you have the president, as you have pointed out so well, all over the place, trying to talk about Iran in all caps in a tweet when we're in the middle of trying to figure out what happened here with Russia. And I love that one of his tweets that you just put up on the show, where he literally now said that the Russians definitely don't want Trump. Okay, that is so far-fetched from what of all the security people have found, all the intelligence people. And so that is why having Republican voices and getting them to speak out, which hasn't always been easy, but when they do, that shows that we're standing up for democracy, and it's not just a partisan game and a bunch of tweets with the president.
Are you concerned that that message won't be getting through to voters, that they'll just see this all as a big partisan fight, and they'll read a tweet like that and maybe they'll be fooled?
Well, that's what he wants to do. As he said today at the rally, he wants to create an alternative reality. But first of all, I'm a kid of a reporter, and I believe that facts matter, and that you can be entitled to your own opinions, but not your own facts. And I think we need to keep getting that out there to people every single day. Secondly, people have a lot of faith in our intelligence community and our law enforcement officers. And when they are telling the American people that this happened, regardless of where they are politically, I think that matters. So our job is to make clear that it's not just Democrats that are talking about this, not just elected officials. It's frontline prosecutors. It's FBI. It is people that are really looking at the numbers from both previous administrations under Democrat and Republican presidents.
Talking about the Senate pushing back, or senators pushing back, Senator Lindsey Graham and Bob Menendez have an increased sanction bill that would ramp up sanctions on Russia. It would also require Senate approval to withdraw from NATO, and it bolsters cyber defenses. If this passes, and that's an if still, if this passes, do you think the president would sign it?
I would hope so, and we're going to get a strong support. I've been working with Senator Graham on parts of that bill, and I think we're going to get a strong support for it, just as we did. As you know, we got a 98-2 vote last time on Russian sanctions, and you have time and time again now people coming out and saying that they believe that this wasn't just meddling, this was a cyber attack. And that is why the two things we have to do is, one, allow the Mueller investigation to continue so we go after the wrongdoers and figure out exactly what happened. And then secondly, and equally important, with the election, about 100 days away this week, that we have security in place to protect our state election equipment in every county in this country.
The president, talking about tariffs, changing the subject, wants to send billions of dollars in aid to farmers. Where is that money going to be coming from?
Well, that is some money that exists in a USDA, the Department of Agriculture account for help for farmers when this kind of thing happens. But, you know, I am coming from an ag state. I know how much they're suffering. I hear from my soybean farmers. We're big in soybean, corn, you name it. And these tariffs are very, very difficult for our farmers and all over my state. So while I appreciate that they're trying to help, they're basically trying to fix the problem that they caused. I'm going to be meeting with some Canadians tonight. You know, they walked away, our administration did, from negotiating with Mexico and Canada on an agreement that I think most of our farmers want, and most of our state want to see fair trade, not just trade, fair trade. They want to see trade. They don't just want to get a bunch of aid. They want to have a consistent agreement that creates consistency into the future, not just for a year, not just a few years, not a one-shot deal. That's how they do business. And so, yes, is it good that they're helping them out? Sure. But is it the right solution policy-wise in the long term? No. We need to have fair trade agreements, and we need to have consistent policy and message coming out of the White House. We are in an incredibly difficult global trade environment, and we have to be strong and work with our allies and not be criticizing them all the time.
Do you think that this sort of bailout is akin to corporate welfare?
I think you have a situation where decisions by the White House, not just with China, but with all of our allies, and I think there was general agreement that we needed to push China, have hurt hardworking people. And that's why we have a lot of programs in place to address that when that happens. But again, I don't think this is the ideal solution by any means. I would like them to be working with the rest of the world, to be realizing that America is stronger when we have trading partners and allies. It is very difficult for us to compete with China when the president goes out there and disses some of our major allies that have not just trading partners, but stood with us, like the Canadians in the fight in Afghanistan. They were there. After 9/11, it was the Canadians that came into New York, did a major event to raise money for the victims. That's the Canadians. They have been our friends for a long time. They're the embassy that had the signs that said friends, partners, allies. So that is my problem with this approach. And I think you're now starting to see the other foot fall with the help that they're going to have to give out because of their approach.
Senator Amy Klobuchar. Senator, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor, subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Meet the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP, and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.